Friends, this is a channel about real life. No sugarcoating, no lies, only men's stories full of struggle, betrayal, and loss. It's about those who life knocked down, but who still found the strength to rise and keep going. If you seek honesty, strength, and inspiration, you're in the right place.
Ethan looked at the surface of Lake Superior, its waters dark and endless, stretching toward the horizon like a vast mirror reflecting the dimming sky. He held Ava's tiny hand in his, feeling the warmth of her small fingers against the biting chill of the evening wind. Beside him, Leah laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she guided their daughter closer to the shoreline. The family had come here seeking peace, a break from the constant hum of city life. But the lake had a way of making ordinary moments feel uncanny. As the sun dipped below the treeline, a sudden fog rolled over the lake, curling around the trees and creeping across the rocks, swallowing the familiar path back to their small cabin. Ethan's heart tightened. He had read the stories about Lake Superior, the shipwrecks, the missing hikers, the legends whispered in towns along its shore, but he had never believed them. Now, watching the mist twist and thicken, he felt a quiet, unsettling pull, as if the fog itself was inviting him to step closer, to venture beyond the visible edge. "Ethan, look." Leah's voice broke the spell. She was pointing at something half-submerged in the water, a dark shape that shifted, almost like it had life. Ethan squinted, but the shape disappeared as quickly as it appeared, leaving only ripples spreading across the lake's glassy surface. He swallowed, trying to convince himself it was a log or the reflection of a bird, anything ordinary. Yet the feeling in his chest, the sense that something unseen was observing them, would not dissipate. Night fell swiftly, and the fog became thicker, curling around the cabin and the surrounding pine trees. Ethan carried Ava inside, closing the door against the growing chill, but the unease clung to him. From somewhere in the distance, across the quiet lake, a faint glow appeared, like a lantern moving slowly among the trees. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. Ethan felt drawn to it, a compulsion that made his stomach twist. Leah noticed his gaze and followed it. "It's probably someone camping across the way," she said lightly, but Ethan did not move his eyes. There was something about that glow, the rhythm of its movement, almost deliberate, that spoke to something deep within him, a curiosity mingled with fear. The lake had secrets, he realized, and tonight it seemed determined to reveal one. The fog thickened over Lake Superior as night deepened, wrapping the cabin and the surrounding pines in a suffocating shroud. Ethan could feel the cold seep into his bones despite the warm fire crackling in the small stone fireplace. He paced the wooden floor, Ava asleep in her crib, and Leah reading quietly beside the flickering flames. The glow he had seen across the water earlier lingered in his mind, impossible to ignore. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was a distant boat or another camper, anything rational, but deep down he knew rationality would not suffice here. A sudden creak of the floorboards made him freeze. He listened, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence of the fog-bound night. A whisper of movement outside the window drew his gaze to the lake, where a shadowy figure stood just at the edge of visibility. It seemed almost ethereal, shifting between forms, as if it was not entirely bound by the rules of this world. Ethan's pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and irresistible curiosity pulling him toward the door. The wind carried an unearthly murmur, soft words almost audible over the howl of the night. He could not place the language, the tone, but it resonated with something ancient deep inside him. Compelled, he stepped outside, the snow crunching under his boots, each footfall echoing through the dense fog. The glow from the figure pulsed slightly, inviting him onward, guiding him toward the lake's frozen edge. Ethan's mind raced. He knew he should return to the warmth of the cabin, to the safety of his family, but the pull was relentless, intoxicating. He remembered the stories he had scoffed at, the missing travelers and sunken boats, the inexplicable phenomena locals whispered about in hushed tones. And a cold realization gripped him. Lake Superior had chosen tonight, chosen him. The figure, now closer, revealed a faint outline. Tall, indistinct, almost shimmering, with an aura that felt alive. Ethan took a hesitant step forward, the fog curling around his legs like liquid mist. Suddenly, the glow shifted, showing not one, but multiple shapes emerging from the mist, phantoms dancing just beyond clarity. He stumbled back, heart hammering, fear and awe mixing in a cocktail of disbelief and wonder. The air grew colder, denser, charged with a strange electricity that made his hair stand on end. He could no longer hear the familiar sounds of the forest or the lake. Everything else had vanished into a void of silent tension, leaving only him and the figures in the fog. Hours seemed to stretch into an endless night, the boundary between reality and something else blurring with every step he took toward the lake. Ethan realized that the lake was not merely water and ice, but a living entity with secrets older than the town itself, secrets that had waited decades, perhaps centuries, for someone brave or foolish enough to seek them. And tonight, he was that someone. Ethan moved cautiously along the frozen shoreline, the fog wrapping around him like a living veil, distorting the familiar landscape into something both beautiful and menacing. Each step seemed to echo in the thickened silence, and the snow beneath his boots crunched like brittle glass. The shadowy figures from before now lingered closer, their forms more defined yet still ethereal, shimmering with a light that seemed to come from within, a glow that was alive, almost breathing. He strained to see, to understand, but the fog swallowed details and teased his perception. He remembered Ava, sleeping peacefully in the cabin, her tiny chest rising and falling with innocent calm. The thought tore at him, guilt and fear warring inside his chest. He could turn back, return to the warmth and safety, but some unseen force urged him forward, a compulsion deeper than reason. Something ancient called to him from the heart of the lake, its whispers curling around his mind like smoke, impossible to ignore. The ground underfoot changed as he approached the water's edge, ice giving way to jagged rocks slick with frost. A low hum began to rise from beneath the surface, vibrating through his bones. The figures moved with deliberate grace, circling each other, patterns forming and dissolving in a hypnotic rhythm. Ethan's vision blurred. He could see the lake not as water, but as a vast portal of shifting colors and shadowed shapes, a mirror of realities layered upon one another. He felt weightless, suspended between fear and fascination, the air around him tingling with an electric anticipation. Suddenly, a figure broke from the group, gliding toward him with silent authority. It raised a hand, the glow intensifying, drawing him in. Ethan hesitated, breath visible in the icy air, heart pounding in sync with the pulse of the glow. He stepped forward, compelled, and the ground beneath him seemed to ripple, as if the lake itself acknowledged his presence. Every rational thought fled as he felt a strange warmth emanating from the figure, a comfort that contrasted the cold, biting wind and the eerie isolation of the fog. Time no longer felt linear. Minutes stretched into hours, yet each moment was acutely sharp, saturated with colors, sounds, and sensations beyond comprehension. Ethan sensed history, memories of those who had come before, echoes of lives swallowed by the lake, lessons hidden in the depths. He was not alone in experiencing this. The lake, the fog, and the figures were part of a continuum of secrets, waiting for him to understand, to choose, to transform. A distant sound, perhaps the wind, perhaps something else, jolted him. In a blink, the figures receded into the mist, the glow dimmed, and for a heartbeat, the world returned to normal. The lake's surface reflected the moon again, still and clear, but the knowledge of what he had witnessed lingered. Ethan felt the weight of understanding pressing on him, a secret he could not yet share, a story that would change him forever. The pool of the lake was not gone. It would remain a silent promise of mysteries waiting to unfold in the hours yet to come. The fog had not lifted by the time Ethan returned to the cabin, though the air was quieter, almost deceptively calm. Liao was awake, her eyes wide as she looked at him, sensing the shift in his demeanor though she could not yet name it. Ava stirred in her crib, murmuring softly, oblivious to the tension that gripped her parents. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together fragments of what he had seen, what he had felt at the edge of the lake. The figures, the glow, the hum of the ice, it all hinted at something vast, ancient, and impossible to explain. He could not ignore it. That night, he ventured back to the shore, careful to keep the cabin behind him, the warmth of his family's presence a faint anchor in the icy world. The fog thickened once again, wrapping the trees and rocks like a living veil. The lake, calm and dark in daylight, now seemed to breathe, exhaling mists that formed shapes, whispers that brushed against his ears. Ethan felt drawn to a particular point where the ice was thinner, where the water shimmered with an unnatural light, as if the lake itself beckoned him closer. Each step was deliberate, each breath a struggle against the biting cold. And then he saw it, a doorway of water, faintly glowing, suspended above the surface. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat calling him. Ethan's rational mind screamed to turn back, to flee to the safety of the cabin and the warmth of his family. But the compulsion was irresistible. He reached out, fingers brushing the shimmering edge, and a rush of images flooded his mind. Fragments of lives, people lost to the lake, secrets of time folding over themselves, messages carried on waves of memory and ice. Suddenly, the figures emerged again, surrounding him, forming a circle, their glow casting dancing shadows across the snow. They did not speak, yet their presence communicated something profound, something Ethan could almost grasp but not fully understand. The lake had a story, a warning, a path, and he was at the beginning of it. As he watched, mesmerized, the ice beneath his feet creaked, small fissures spreading outward. Yet he felt no fear, only awe and the irresistible need to see, to learn, to follow. Hours passed unnoticed. When Ethan finally looked back toward the cabin, the fog had parted slightly, revealing the warm glow of the windows and the silhouette of his family. For a moment, he was torn between two worlds, the familiar safety of home and the enigmatic, pulsing life of the lake. He knew the lake had chosen him for a reason, that the night's events were only the beginning, and that whatever awaited him beneath the fog and water would demand courage, wit, and perhaps a sacrifice he had yet to imagine. Ethan stepped closer to the glowing edge of the lake, the cold biting through his boots and socks, but he hardly noticed. The figures were still there, ethereal and luminous, forming patterns in the fog that seemed deliberate, almost like a language made of light and shadow. He raised a hand, trembling slightly, and one of the figures mirrored him, as if acknowledging his presence, testing his intent. The hum from the lake grew louder, vibrating through his chest and bones, a sound that resonated with the deepest parts of his consciousness. He could see shapes beneath the surface now, movements that defied logic, like currents of memory flowing beneath the ice. Faces, fleeting and shadowed, appeared for a moment and then vanished, leaving him grasping at fragments of stories he could not yet understand. It was as if the lake had absorbed the lives of those who had come before, preserving pieces of them in the frozen water, replaying echoes of history for anyone who dared to watch. Ethan felt both fear and awe, an intoxicating mixture that made him lean forward, closer to the glowing doorway, closer to the secret that called to him. Suddenly, the air shifted, colder and sharper, carrying a scent he could not place. Something ancient, metallic, and wet, like the smell of rain on iron. The figures moved faster, circling him, their glow intensifying, and Ethan realized they were not just guiding him, but testing him. A sudden vision flashed in his mind. A boat lost to the lake decades ago, its passengers frozen mid-motion, reaching out, silent mouths open in a scream he could almost hear. The same glow had surrounded them. He thought, the lake choosing who would see, who would understand. He stumbled back slightly, overwhelmed, but the lake would not let him retreat. The glowing doorway pulsed, inviting him in, promising knowledge and danger intertwined. Ethan felt compelled to step forward, to touch the surface fully, and in that moment, the boundary between the real world and the lake's secret dimension seemed to dissolve. The fog swirled violently, obscuring his vision, yet he felt an undeniable connection, a link between his mind and the lake, his soul and the stories trapped beneath the ice. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning here. Every sound, every light, every subtle shift in the fog communicated something profound. He understood, in ways words could not convey, that the lake was alive, aware, patient, and immensely powerful. And now, it had chosen him as the next participant in its endless, enigmatic history. Ethan's heart pounded, adrenaline and fear mingling with a strange exhilaration. He knew this was only the beginning, that the coming hours would test him, reveal secrets, and challenge the very essence of what he believed about reality. Ethan's hand hovered over the glowing water, and when he touched the surface, a shiver ran through his body, a sensation both electric and organic. The figures swirled around him, their light intensifying, and suddenly, he felt as if the lake was breathing through him, communicating without words, without sound, reaching into the deepest corners of his mind. Memories not his own surged, glimpses of travelers long gone, moments of terror and awe, stories of people who had vanished into the lake without a trace. Each pulse of light seemed to imprint itself on his consciousness, leaving him trembling with understanding and fear. Back at the cabin, Liao was unaware of what was unfolding. She glanced occasionally toward the window, sensing the unusual quiet outside, the strange stillness that made her uneasy. Ava stirred, a soft murmur escaping her lips, yet she remained asleep, oblivious to the invisible tension encasing the world outside. Ethan knew he could not stay, that the lake demanded more, and somehow he could feel the connection extending beyond the fog, beyond the ice, beyond the edge of the visible world. A sudden pull dragged him further across the frozen shoreline, toward a cluster of rocks protruding like jagged teeth. The figures guided him here, circling, pulsing, their rhythm synchronizing with the heartbeat he could feel deep within the ice. The glowing doorway rippled, expanding slightly, revealing glimpses of shapes beneath the surface, forms that were alive and yet not, as if the lake had preserved the echoes of life and memory in liquid crystal. Ethan's mind reeled, a chaotic storm of curiosity, fear, and wonder, each emotion magnified by the surreal nature of what he witnessed. Then he heard it, faint at first, a whisper carried on the wind, words in a language unspoken for centuries, melodic and haunting, wrapping around his consciousness like a song and a warning simultaneously. Ethan realized the lake was alive in more ways than he could comprehend. It was aware, intelligent, and patient. The figures, he understood, were guardians or guides, teaching him, testing him, pulling him toward a truth that could alter everything he thought he knew about the world. He crouched near the glowing water, touching the ice lightly, and felt the current of energy pass through him, a cold warmth that burned and soothed simultaneously. Time seemed irrelevant. Reality itself felt malleable, bending around him and the lake's presence. Each moment was stretched, each sound exaggerated, each shadow meaningful. Ethan was alone, yet completely immersed in a living story older than human memory, a narrative written in water, ice, fog, and light. With him now a part of its unfolding. As dawn approached, the fog began to thin slightly, revealing the distant outline of the cabin. Leah and Ava appeared as if nothing had happened, warm and serene, the ordinary world waiting for him to return. Ethan stepped back, the figures fading into the mist, the glow diminishing, but the experience had marked him forever. He understood, with a clarity he could not yet speak aloud, that the lake held more secrets than any human could ever fully grasp, and tonight had been only an introduction, a testing ground for what lay beneath its icy, mysterious surface. Ethan stumbled backward from the glowing water, the frost biting his legs through thin pants, yet he barely noticed. The fog had begun to lift slightly, revealing the distant outline of the cabin where Leah and Ava remained, untouched by the lake's mysteries, unaware of the ordeal Ethan faced. Yet the pull of the lake was not gone. It lingered in his chest, in the tingling of his fingers, in the echo of the figure's light, guiding him, questioning him, refusing to release him completely. As he walked toward the cabin, the terrain shifted beneath him. Rocks and ice seemed to bend and stretch, distances expanding and contracting like the lake itself was playing with perception. Shadows flickered in the corners of his eyes, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes resembling forms he knew. A fisherman long lost, a hiker from decades past, each figure vanishing when he tried to look directly. The boundary between reality and the lake's realm thinned, and Ethan felt the world rearranging itself around him, a silent pressure urging him to understand, to see, to accept. He paused, breath misting in the frigid air, heart hammering. The figures reappeared, their glowing forms circling him, pulsing with the same rhythm as his own heartbeat. One figure stepped closer, distinct now, humanoid yet shimmering with an inner light. Ethan reached out instinctively, and the figure's glow seemed to transfer into him, a rush of knowledge and sensation flooding his mind. Memories not his own, places he had never seen, people he had never met, all converged in a swirling torrent of understanding. The lake's story was vast, its history layered, and he was now a part of its living memory. As he neared the cabin, the ordinary world tried to reassert itself. Leah stepped onto the porch, calling his name, her voice bright and normal. Ava cooed softly, reaching toward him. Ethan blinked, the lake's visions fading like mist and sunlight, but he knew the experience had left indelible marks. Something fundamental had shifted within him. The lake's call was now a permanent echo, a presence that would shape every thought and feeling. He crossed the final stretch of snow to the cabin, the fog almost completely gone, the warm light of home enveloping him. Leah embraced him, concern in her eyes, but Ethan could not fully explain what he had seen. Words seemed inadequate. He simply held her, felt Ava against his chest, and yet in the deepest part of his mind, he knew the lake awaited, patient and eternal, ready to reveal more, to test more, and to claim a part of every soul brave enough to stand at its edge. The morning after the encounter, Ethan awoke feeling different. The warmth of the cabin, the familiar creaks of the wooden floor, the soft coos of Ava, all seemed muted, as if filtered through a lens he could not adjust. He tried to speak, to explain, but the words came out hollow, incapable of conveying the depth of what he had experienced. Leah noticed the change immediately, concern knitting her brow, but Ethan could only shake his head, a faint smile masking the storm of revelation inside him. Throughout the day, small anomalies appeared. Sounds came from nowhere, whispers of wind carrying hints of voices he had never heard yet somehow recognized. Shadows moved differently, lingering at the edge of perception, bending subtly with intent. When he glanced toward the lake, now distant and serene in daylight, he felt the hum, faint but insistent, calling him back, reminding him that the lake's reach was not limited to night or fog or glow. It was always present, waiting, patient, eternal. He tried to focus on normal life, teaching Ava to walk on the snow-covered porch, helping Leah gather firewood, preparing breakfast. Yet even these ordinary actions were tinged with unease. Each reflection in a window, each ripple in a cup of water, seemed to shimmer with echoes of the glowing figures, faint impressions of what he had witnessed. He realized the lake had left a mark on him, a permanent connection that could not be severed. He was both himself and a vessel for the lake's memory, its stories flowing through his consciousness. By evening, the pull intensified. Ethan could no longer resist the urge to return. He left the cabin under the pretense of checking the perimeter, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The path to the lake was familiar yet subtly altered. Trees shifted slightly, shadows stretched, and the fog, though thin, seemed to pulse with anticipation. The glowing doorway had not disappeared. He realized it had merely waited, patient and unwavering. He approached the edge, heart pounding, aware that this return was a test, a choice, and possibly a commitment that could change everything. The figures appeared immediately, closer than before, their forms clearer, radiating a light that was both comforting and terrifying. Ethan reached out instinctively, feeling the pulse of energy transfer into him, the lake's memory intertwining with his own. For hours, he lingered at the edge, observing, absorbing, understanding. He glimpsed moments from the past, lives intersecting with his, the lake's timeless narrative unfolding around him. He realized he could not fully explain this to anyone, even if he tried. The language of ordinary human experience was inadequate. This was beyond words, beyond fear, beyond awe, an eternal rhythm, a living story, and he was now its part. Days passed, yet Ethan's perception remained altered. The cabin, the lake, the surrounding woods, all seemed subtly different, edges sharper, shadows longer, whispers in the wind clearer. Leon noticed his distracted gaze, the way he sometimes froze mid-step, staring into the fog, as if it contained secrets only he could see. Ava reached for him, and he felt her warmth, grounding him. Yet even this simple act was tinged with the residue of the lake's power. Ethan ventured closer to the lake each day, the glow now a familiar, almost comforting presence, but it tested him in ways he could not fully anticipate. The figures became more defined, communicating not with words, but with movement, rhythm, and light. He understood them intuitively, each gesture carrying meaning, each pulse of glow a story. He could feel the lake's history, the lives it had touched, the mysteries it had preserved beneath the ice, and a part of him longed to surrender fully, to become a permanent part of its narrative. Back in the cabin, Leah began noticing strange occurrences. Objects moved slightly, sounds echoed unnaturally, shadows lingered where there should have been none. Ethan tried to explain, but any rational explanation fell flat. She began to fear not only for him, but for the family, sensing that the lake's influence extended beyond him, touching the boundaries of their reality. The tension grew, unspoken and thick, a silent acknowledgement that something beyond comprehension had entered their lives. One night, Ethan finally allowed himself to step fully onto the thin ice near the glowing doorway. The figures formed a ring around him, their light coalescing into a single, pulsing energy. He felt his consciousness expand, time folding over itself, histories overlapping, secrets of the lake streaming into him like a flood. He realized the true nature of the lake. It was not just water and ice, but a sentient, ancient being, a keeper of memory and life. choosing those who would witness and those who would be absorbed into its eternal story. When he returned to the cabin, dawn breaking over the frozen lake, Leah and Ava seemed unchanged, oblivious to the transformation occurring within him. Ethan understood that he now carried a dual reality, the ordinary world and the lake's hidden realm coexisting in parallel, intersecting only when he chose or when the lake allowed. His life had shifted irreversibly. The glow, the figures, the stories, they were part of him now, a permanent echo, a living secret he could never fully share. Ethan returned to the lake at night, the moon casting silver streaks across the frozen surface. The glow awaited him, steady and pulsing, more intense than ever. The figures were everywhere now, moving with a purpose, their patterns more intricate, almost ritualistic. Each pulse of light carried a message, a fragment of understanding, and Ethan felt himself becoming part of something immense, something beyond time. From the cabin, Leah saw a faint glow through the fog and instinctively knew something was wrong. She called out to Ethan, her voice trembling, yet he did not hear her the same way. He was partly in their world, partly in the lake's reality, straddling dimensions. The air hummed with power, vibrating through the snow, through the trees, through his very bones. The ice beneath him reflected not only moonlight, but shifting scenes, visions of those who had encountered the lake before, lives intersecting and overlapping in patterns he could just perceive. Ethan reached the glowing doorway again. This time, the figures formed a perfect circle, the glow rising like a beacon. He stepped through, and reality shifted completely. He was surrounded by the lake's memory, by echoes of centuries, by stories of people who had vanished, now preserved in its eternal depths. Time twisted and folded, yet he could see threads, follow lines of cause and effect, understand moments that had seemed disconnected. Every pulse of the lake's light revealed a new truth, a new secret, each more profound than the last. Leah and Ava, watching from the cabin, began to perceive small, impossible things, shadows moving independently, reflections behaving strangely, whispers carried by wind where no source existed. Fear and wonder mingled in her chest, and she realized that Ethan had crossed into something extraordinary. The lake's presence was not just in him anymore. It was beginning to reach into their world. Hours passed in what felt like seconds. Ethan absorbed the stories, the knowledge, the living memory of the lake. He felt a strange calm, a sense of inevitability, knowing that his life had been changed forever. The figures began to fade, the glow dimmed slightly, but the connection remained permanent, a thread between him and the lake, unbroken. He turned toward the cabin, heart heavy with understanding, carrying a secret too vast for words, too profound for the ordinary world. The morning after the lake's intense glow, Ethan awoke to a quiet cabin. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and snow, yet something lingered, subtle and impossible to ignore. He moved carefully, feeling the residual energy of the lake pulsing faintly beneath his skin, a connection he could neither break nor fully understand. Leah stirred, her eyes meeting his, concern mixed with curiosity. She could sense the difference, a weight in his presence, a strange depth in his gaze, something that made her instinctively cautious. Ava played nearby, unaware of the tension vibrating around them. Ethan smiled, tried to speak normally, but words felt inadequate. He had glimpsed eternity, walked within the lake's memory, and returned. Nothing could explain it. Even as he cooked breakfast, the air shifted in subtle ways. Shadows lingered longer, reflections shimmered unnaturally, and faint whispers brushed past him, almost imperceptible yet undeniably present. He decided to venture outside briefly, hoping the cold would ground him. The lake lay in the distance, calm and serene by daylight, yet its surface shimmered faintly, with an unearthly glow. Ethan felt a pull, a gentle tug, reminding him that the connection remained persistent and patient. He glanced back at the cabin, Liao watching him with both fear and trust, and realized that life had changed irreversibly. The lake's influence would shape him, subtly, constantly, a thread woven into every step he took. As days passed, Ethan tried to resume normality, yet the lake's presence colored every perception. Sounds carried extra meaning, shadows hinted at hidden truths, and even Ava's laughter resonated differently, vibrating with layers he could sense but not describe. Liao began noticing these subtle oddities as well, moments where reality seemed slightly off, where Ethan seemed attuned to things beyond human comprehension. She did not fully understand, yet she trusted him, feeling the weight of an invisible story unfolding around them. Ethan knew he would return to the lake, to continue unraveling its mysteries, but he also understood the delicate balance now required. He was a bridge between worlds, a living repository of the lake's memory, yet tethered to his family, to human life, to love and connection. The duality would define him, shaping choices, perceptions, and every moment of his existence. He walked back to the cabin, feeling the frost underfoot, the sun low in the sky, carrying the knowledge that his life had forever merged with something vast, ancient, and alive. Nights became restless. Ethan slept lightly, the lake's memory haunting his dreams, whispers of past lives and lost travelers seeping into his subconscious. Shadows in the cabin moved independently, almost playfully, teasing him with glimpses of the lake's presence. Leon noticed Ava sometimes staring at empty corners, cooing and reaching as if someone invisible stood there. Fear and curiosity mingled in her heart. The ordinary world was no longer entirely theirs. Ethan felt the pull intensify. He wandered near the lake during twilight, drawn by the same glow, the same figures, the same rhythm that had first mesmerized him. Each step carried the weight of centuries, each breath resonating with the hum of frozen water. The lake was patient, observing, and simultaneously teaching him. It imparted knowledge without words, showing him truths older than humanity, yet impossible to articulate. Back in the cabin, Liao confronted him gently, asking if he was truly all right, sensing something extraordinary simmering beneath his calm demeanor. Ethan looked at her, tried to reassure her, but the weight of what he carried made it impossible. He realized he had changed irreversibly. The lake had not only imprinted its story upon him, but had begun subtly influencing their shared reality. Small things, shadows, sounds, reflections, hinted at a presence no one else could fully comprehend. One evening, as snow swirled in the faint light, Ethan saw a figure emerge from the fog. Its glow illuminated the frozen surface, casting intricate patterns across the ice. He felt a compulsion to approach, aware that crossing this threshold could redefine everything. Liat called after him, fear evident, but the pull was irresistible. He stepped forward, the snow crunching beneath his boots, each step a deliberate choice, each heartbeat synchronizing with the lake's pulse. As he reached the glowing edge, the figures converged, forming a perfect circle. Ethan felt the rush of energy, the intertwining of his consciousness with the lake's memory, the past and present colliding in a torrent of understanding. He realized that the lake's influence was permanent, shaping not only him, but subtly reaching into the lives of those he loved. The family's ordinary reality and the lake's hidden world were now irrevocably intertwined. The night was still, yet alive. Ethan approached the lake once more, the air thick with anticipation. The glow had intensified, pulsating like a heartbeat, reflecting off the snow in a surreal dance of light. The figures were fully formed now, humanoid yet alien, their presence commanding and serene. Every pulse seemed to resonate with Ethan's own energy, and he realized he was no longer merely an observer. He was part of the lake's consciousness, a conduit for its story. Leah, standing at the cabin edge, watched in awe and fear. The wind carried whispers, faint words in a language both ancient and impossibly beautiful. Ava clutched her mother's hand. Her small eyes, wide as shadows, danced across the ice, shapes shifting and forming patterns beyond human comprehension. Ethan reached the glowing circle, each step heavy with history, each breath intertwined with the lake's rhythm. The figures aligned around him, their lights converging into a radiant sphere. A sudden surge of energy enveloped Ethan, memories, visions, and sensations flooding him all at once. He saw lives intertwined with the lake, travelers who had vanished, stories preserved in its depths. Time collapsed, space bent, and he felt both immense power and profound humility. The lake revealed itself as a living chronicle, a guardian of memory and experience, patient yet insistent, eternal yet ever-changing. For hours that felt like minutes, Ethan absorbed the knowledge, the history, the emotions encoded in the lake's essence. He understood the responsibility to carry this memory, to respect it, to live in harmony with it. The pull on his family was subtle but undeniable. Shadows flickered around them. Whispers teased the edges of perception. And they too sensed that something extraordinary had entered their lives. As dawn approached, the glow dimmed slightly, the figures fading into the mist. But Ethan knew the connection was permanent. He stepped back on his solid ice, feeling the weight of centuries within him, yet tethered to the warmth of his family. Leah and Ava approached cautiously, sensing the change, yet unsure how to respond. Ethan held them both close, aware that the ordinary world and the lake's mysterious reality now coexisted, intertwined irrevocably. Days turned into a week, yet the lake's influence persisted. Ethan moved through the cabin and surrounding woods with heightened awareness. Every sound, every shadow, every glint of sunlight on snow seemed to carry meaning. He was hyper-conscious of the unseen forces, the subtle ripples of the lake's presence. Leon noticed the change in him, a serenity mixed with tension, a quiet vigilance that had replaced his once ordinary demeanor. Ava's laughter sometimes stopped abruptly, as if she sensed something beyond the visible, pointing toward empty spaces where shadows danced. Leah's unease grew. She could feel that the lake's mysteries were no longer contained to Ethan alone. Objects shifted slightly, whispers lingered in the wind, and the fog rolled in even when weather predicted clear skies. Ethan explained little. Knowing words could not capture the depth of what they were experiencing. Each night, the lake called him gently yet irresistibly. He would walk to the edge, feeling the ice beneath him vibrate, the glow of the figures pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He began to see patterns in the light, understand the lake's memory as if it spoke directly to him. Yet he also saw hints of danger. The lake was patient, but it demanded respect, obedience, and understanding. One misstep could change everything permanently. The family tried to maintain normal life, yet the subtle presence of the lake pervaded every moment. Ethan found small ways to shield them, to anchor them in the ordinary world, while simultaneously exploring the mysteries he had become part of. Leah began to notice small gifts, insights, intuition, and a heightened awareness of her surroundings, subtle but undeniable. They were all being touched by the lake, each in their own way, forever changed. As night fell, Ethan walked once more to the glowing circle. The figures gathered, this time slower, deliberate, as if aware of his growing mastery. He stepped into the center, feeling energy flow through him, a communion between human and eternal. The ice reflected the night sky, stars twinkling alongside the lake's ethereal glow. In this moment, He understood the delicate balance of two worlds and how his choices, his love for his family, and his respect for the lake's memory would define their shared future. The following nights were restless for all of them. Ethan felt the lake's pulse even when far from the ice, a subtle hum threading through his thoughts. Shadows shifted in the cabin, whispers curled in corners, and Leah could no longer dismiss what she saw. Ava sometimes pointed at empty spaces, giggling or frowning at figures that were not there. The family had been drawn into the lake's rhythm, the boundary between ordinary life and mystical reality thinning day by day. Ethan guided them gently, teaching Leah to recognize signs, subtle hints in shadows, in reflections, in the chill of the wind. He could feel the lake's memory flowing through him, yet he now understood responsibility. The glowing figures were patient, but they responded to intent, to respect, to the depth of connection. Missteps would have consequences, yet careful attention brought insight, clarity, understanding of time, of lives, of histories layered beneath the ice. One night, Ethan led Leah and Ava to the frozen lake, each step measured, each breath deliberate. The glow shimmered beneath them, more radiant than ever, casting dancing lights across snow and ice. Figures emerged, circling slowly, their presence serene but powerful. Ethan stepped forward, sensing a culmination, a meeting point of the human world and the lake's eternal memory. Leah held Ava close, fear mingling with wonder, yet the lake accepted their cautious trust, welcoming without harm. Time stretched and folded, the night air thick with resonance. Ethan felt the culmination of knowledge, emotion, history, and connection. The figures pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and he understood fully that life was now dual, ordinary and extraordinary coexisting. He could carry his family, shield them, yet guide them to subtle awareness. The lake had imprinted itself, but not as a threat. It was a teacher, a preserver, a guardian of stories, selecting those willing to listen, to learn, and to honor its eternal existence. As dawn broke, the glow dimmed slightly, returning to its quiet hum beneath the ice. The family walked back to the cabin, touched by the supernatural, yet grounded in love and trust. Ethan held Leah and Ava close, knowing they had all been transformed, forever intertwined with something larger, something timeless, something alive beneath the frozen lake. The experience had ended, but also had just begun. A lifelong journey, a shared secret, a living memory that would resonate in every heartbeat, every shadow, every whisper of wind. Weeks passed, yet the lake's memory lingered. Ethan, Leah, and Ava resumed daily routines, yet subtle changes persisted. The cabin felt alive in ways beyond ordinary perception. Light shifted unexpectedly. Shadows moved slightly out of sync, and occasional whispers brushed past them like wind carrying secrets. The family adapted, learning to live alongside the lake's presence without fear, aware that ordinary life and extraordinary reality now coexisted. Ethan often glanced toward the frozen expanse, the glowing doorway hidden beneath ice, reminding him that the lake's stories were always with him. Leah, now attuned to subtle anomalies, sensed the gentle rhythm of the lake in small movements and sounds, understanding that life had become layered, ordinary events intertwined with threads of mystical truth. Ava, innocent and intuitive, would sometimes laugh or point at shadows no one else could see, a tiny link between human curiosity and the lake's eternal memory. Evenings became a ritual of quiet observation. Ethan would lead the family outside to watch the shimmering ice, the faint glow beneath, without fear or obsession, just respect and acknowledgement. The figures no longer intimidated. They were a constant, gentle presence, a silent reminder of lessons learned and mysteries shared. Each day, The family grew stronger, closer, harmonizing ordinary life with the extraordinary experiences that had reshaped their perception. Ethan understood that his life had irrevocably changed. He was a bridge between two realities: the world he knew and the hidden, timeless world beneath the lake's frozen surface. The experience had taught him patience, awareness, and reverence for forces beyond comprehension. He held Leah and Ava close, feeling their warmth, their humanity, their connection, and realized that love anchored him in the ordinary, even as he carried the extraordinary within. The sun rose over the lake, sparkling on ice and snow, casting reflections that seemed ordinary, yet carried a quiet, magical resonance. Ethan smiled, aware that the story was ongoing, a living narrative beneath the frozen surface, a memory intertwined with his own life. The family walked back to the cabin, hearts steady, minds alert, knowing that the lake would always be there, patient, eternal, waiting, guiding, and quietly teaching, forever a part of them. The last days by the lake felt calm, yet charged with memory. Ethan, Leah, and Ava had found a rhythm, ordinary life infused with subtle awareness of the lake's presence. Every snow-covered branch, every reflection on ice, every whispering wind carried traces of what had transpired. They no longer feared these signs, but recognized them as part of a story larger than themselves, a story that had chosen them as witnesses and participants. Ethan felt a quiet pride and humility, knowing he had walked between worlds. He guided Leah and Ava gently, teaching them to respect what they could not fully understand, to honor the unseen, to live with awareness rather than fear. The lake's figures, the glowing doorway, the pulsing memory beneath the ice, all had become part of their shared life, an invisible thread connecting past, present, and future. Leah noticed changes within herself too. She sensed patterns and shadows, faint energies in the wind, and a growing intuition that sometimes revealed truths without explanation. Ava, still innocent, sometimes pointed to spaces that seemed empty but were full of memory and light, connecting her, unknowingly, to the lake's eternal story. Ethan often stood at the edge of the frozen lake, watching the glow beneath the ice, feeling a profound sense of connection and responsibility. The lake had imparted knowledge, history, and emotion, and he carried it carefully, balancing it with love for his family and commitment to ordinary life. They had survived the extraordinary, emerged intact, yet transformed. As they walked back to the cabin together, the morning sun reflecting off the ice, Ethan understood that life had changed irrevocably. The lake was no longer merely a location. It was a living memory, a teacher, a guardian. And in its quiet, patient way, it would continue to shape their lives. The family's ordinary world and the lake's extraordinary presence existed side by side, intertwined forever, a secret and a legacy, a story that would live in every heartbeat, every shadow, every whisper of wind. Ethan held Leah and Ava close, feeling warmth, safety, and love, knowing that the journey had ended, but the connection would last for a lifetime. They had learned, witnessed, survived, and carried forward a story as vast and eternal as the lake itself.